everyone to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name is Christina Hamilton, the series director, and today we present internationally acclaimed theater artist and theatrical media pioneer, Chong. Yeah. Worthy of applause, folks. I want to thank our partners for their support of today's program, the University Musical Society, the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia, the Islamic Studies Program, the International Institute, and Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. A special welcome to all our UMS patrons who are joining us today. And just wanted to take a moment. The University Musical Society, which is now in its 138th season, was nationally recognized this past year with the National Medal of Arts. This is the first university presenter to receive our nation's highest honor, awarded by then President Barack Obama. And it just so happens that along with UMS, when they received this award, our illustrious guest today was also part of this award class, along with our recent presenter, Meredith Monk. And there they all are in DC, preparing to go and receive this award. And here they are with the other artists in their class, also University of Michigan's George Shirley, I must point out. So I thought this was worthy, of taking a moment. Lots of nice connectivity and symbiosis here, and a moment to share our local pride. And congratulations to all on that great award. Yeah. So, I'm sure many of you are ticket holders to the shows. The show coming up on Saturday, Beyond Sacred, Voices of Muslim Identity, 8 p.m. at the Power Center. If you do not have a ticket, there are only a few left, so you better get on your game. You can go to ums.org or the Michigan League box office, or take your chances at the box office at the Power Center the night of the show. Reminder to students, you can get rush tickets for $10 on the day of the show. So not to be missed. Just a couple brief announcements before we get going. There's another opportunity to engage with Chong on his visit. Tomorrow, the Digital Islamic Studies curriculum will present Investigating Islam, a community forum. That's Friday at 2 o'clock in the gallery of UM's Hatcher Library. There'll be faculty panelists joined by cast members from the show. This is another free event, again, 2 p.m. tomorrow at the Hatcher Graduate Library. And the Stamp School is pleased to announce the opening of the brand new Stamps Gallery. This is at 201 South Division Street, just down at the end of the block here on Division between Washington and Liberty Streets. We're taking over the first floor of the McKinley Town Center building. This gallery space is now open, and the 2017 undergraduate juried show is now on view there. We're also going to be having a reception and awards ceremony there on Tuesday next week from 5 to 8, so you can join us, come and check out the students' work and see the new space. Please be aware we're going to be on hiatus for the next 2 weeks in honor of the university's winter break, and then we will return March 9th with British scene maker and designer Andrew Logan. I promise you this is a not-to-be-missed event, and we will have a very special surprise appearance happening along with Andrew Logan that day, which I cannot give away, but I promise it's worth your time. We will have our regular Q&A today, so please do join us in the screening room directly after the talk in here. That's out the doors to the left. Down the hallway, you'll find the screening room. So we'll take questions from directly following that. And now, for a proper introduction of our guest today, please welcome University of Michigan Professor of Theater and Drama and recent Shirley Verrett awardee, Anita Gonzalez.
Hello and welcome. I'm here to introduce you to internationally acclaimed theater artist Chong, a theatrical innovator who creates new works that explore the intersections of race, culture, history, art, media, and technology in the modern world. As a generative artist, he's created over 90 works for the stage, winning 5 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowships, 2 OBIE Awards, and 2 BESSIE Awards. In 2013, he won the Doris Duke Award for exemplary artists who have proven their artistic vitality and commitment to their field. Ping Chong was an early pioneer in the use of media in the theater. He trained at the Pratt Institute and worked with seminal artists like Meredith Monk and Ellen Stewart's La Mama Theater. I remember seeing his work in New York City in the 1980s and realizing for the first time how media and movement could merge to bring ethnic stories to life. Ping Chong and Company is an inspiration and a beautiful model for productive international and intercultural collaborations. He's partnered with universities and festivals, granting agencies and community organizations to create theatrical works that make a difference. Each project promotes social activism, drawing from real-life situations, mobilizing the arts to bring atrocities from the past into dialogue with contemporary issues. Undesirable Elements, for example, is an ongoing series of community-specific interview-based theater works, which examine issues of culture and identity for individuals who are outsiders within their mainstream communities. Beyond Sacred, the Voices of Muslim Identity, the work that he brings to Ann Arbor, is part of that series. Ping's larger, full-scale theatrical works incorporate media, puppetry, dance, and other experimental forms. When the Doris Duke Foundation asked Ping to write about projects which characterize his career, he mentions two different works which offer historical and contemporary reflections on African society. One work, Blindness, The Irresistible Light of Encounter from 2004, tells the tragic history of colonialism in the Belgian Congo, using text, movement, puppetry, and projecting. Intercutting the narrative of Conrad's Heart of Darkness with real-life figures of King Leopold II and others who acquired the Congo as their personal colony. His later 2012 work called Cry for Peace, Voices from the Congo, complements the earlier work by looking at the reality of the Congo today through first-person testimonies of Congolese refugees who seek peace and reconciliation in their adopted hometown of Syracuse, New York, and are part of a new movement towards global justice. Ping Chong creates performance through collaborative script building, where artists use their own voices to tell stories. His work is prolific and activist. He inspires all of us to think harder and listen more to one another. I am pleased to welcome Ping Chong to the stage tonight.
Good afternoon. I'm an old guy. I've been around a long time. My own history is that I've been a New Yorker all my life, and New York City is a place of difference, of diversity, and I grew up with this diversity. I grew up in Chinatown, and that's where my next-door neighbors, my druggist was Italian. My landlady was Irish. She was a Ziegfeld Follies girl. So when you grow up in New York, you have a view of the world in microcosm. And my own family history is that I actually am third generation in the theater. My grandfather, my father, my mother were all in the Chinese opera. And I ended up being in the theater, which I didn't expect to be, but here I am. When I was growing up, I like to describe myself as an interdisciplinary artist, because my work includes dance, includes theater, includes visual arts, and includes media. I actually graduated in filmmaking. I studied with Meredith Monk as a dancer. So all these things fed into my work as far as aesthetics goes. So it's all these different things have influenced the kind of theater that I wound up making. And I actually prefer to be described as an interdisciplinary artist than a theater artist, because all of this is true. And I also still do visual arts. When I'm invited to do that, I still make visual arts works. And only this week I was informed that a visual arts project I did is opening, it just opened in Singapore. So my love of the arts really crosses all those different boundaries, and also my appreciation of culture, of people coming from different cultures, is a very deep part of me. I've had a great, it's been a great privilege to be in the performing arts, because I always think, I said, you know, being in the arts, I'm getting paid to learn. I'm getting a free education and I'm getting paid for it. But the other great thing about being in the theater is that you actually get to travel the world. And I've had the great opportunity to have traveled to 52 countries in my lifetime, which is a great privilege. Because of my interest in culture across the globe, Undesirable Elements, the series where I intersect with people from different cultures, is not really a big surprise. And the fact that as simple a work as Undesirable Elements is in terms of form, it's still very much who I am in the presentation. So tonight I'm showing you two different works. One, Undesirable Elements, the Beyond Sacred documentary of the making of Beyond Sacred, which will give you a sense of how that project is actually made and how the people who are in it come to me. The second presentation of slides I'll be showing is from a current show that happens to be playing in Wake Forest and Winston-Salem as tonight, and will be playing through the weekend in Winston-Salem. But first I wanted to show you the documentary of Beyond Sacred so that you get a sense of what you're going to see this weekend. If I can figure out how to run this thing, because I'm not very good at technology, even though I use it. All right. Here we go. Enjoy.
We think of Muslims and we think of one very particular image of what it means to be Muslim, but that's not how it manifests itself.
Being Muslim, I thought it was very interesting to be part of something that can expand the conversation and really open up people's eyes.
Really strong work tonight, you guys. This show, it really feels ready to share with an audience.
I think it's an interesting kind of theater because it crosses boundaries. It's also a kind of communion between one group of people and another. The act of telling stories is a very empowering thing.
We're so afraid of talking about religion as a whole. We tend as a country to let some of the news media drive all of our information without doing our own investigations, rather than listening to it and trying to investigate it and exploring beyond that.
Peaceful Muslims say a lot and do a lot. It's not shown. They don't have a voice. We have no voice.
I'm Stephen Hitt. I'm the Managing Artistic Director of LaGuardia Performing Arts Center at LaGuardia Community College. Beyond Sacred is the overall arching season for a grant that we received to look at Muslim identity through the performing arts. Ping was the first company, the first person who came to my mind as an artist to partner with on this project.
So you're entering, then Maha starts.
मेरा नाम माहा सैयद है। मैं 4 नवंबर साल 1985 में पैदा हुई।
The Undesirable Elements series that he started building, I think, is such a gift to this world.
Undesirable Elements originated as a work that was about empowering people who were marginalized to speak.
2011. Bayside, Queens.
There are certain fixed conventions in Undesirable Elements. The show always begins with the cast introducing themselves.
My name is Kadeen Herring. I was born in West Palm Beach, Florida.
And the form of the show is chronological after that.
A short history of Muslims in America.
A pop quiz.
Certain things, the claps, the dates, there's something inherent in the script structure that is about sharing in the storytelling.
My friend, Samil.
hasn't come to school for a few days. When he finally shows up, he says,
"My uncle died. My uncle is not Taliban, so why did they kill him?"
With Beyond Sacred, it was also very much about giving voice to these people.
I think one of the most fascinating things about Ping's work is that he doesn't hire actors to come in and pretend to be these people. He interviews real people. He works with those people to collect their stories. Then he places them on stage and lets them use their own voice to tell the story.
2001.
2001.
2001.
2001.
September 11th, 2001.
This is a great group. We're a very, very sweet group. How we cast is we put out notices, public notices to people, and then we let them know what the theme of the show is, in this case, Muslim identity in New York. And then we interview, a 2-hour interview, followed by another 2-hour interview, possibly. There's Firdaus. We put the script together based on these interviews, and they haven't met each other. It's like being a detective.
Would you just start by telling us again who you are, where you're from, how long you've been here?
Right now I'm a student.
And lots of times the more out of left field questions can be really revelatory.
They asked me, like, where are you going? When are you coming back?
I'm always looking from the outside. So I'm in this country, but my vision and where my background is something completely different.
One of the challenges in writing, we're trying to take 5 people's life stories and condense them down into a show that's an hour and 15 minutes.
I'm here in residence. This is my first time collaborating on an Undesirable Elements script. And we've spent so much time kind of crafting the language and cutting and building a script. What's really exciting about this process is that I can see coming down the pike, we're about to sort of participate in making a new community of, hopefully, friends.
The first night of rehearsal in an Undesirable Elements project is always really exciting. There is that anticipation of how the cast will respond and what the experience will be for them, seeing the stories woven together for the first time.
When I came in for the first rehearsal, I was really nervous because all I had done so far was talk to Ryan and Sarah and Ping about my life.
We watched the Twin Towers fall. Afterwards, my father says,
As a Muslim, things are going to change from now on.
I'm holding my mother's hand tight as we cross the street. We have to pass a Taliban station.
I attended 16 schools in 20 years. I'm used to being seen as a minority, an outsider.
It was very like a first day of high school type of nerves when we read through the script and we're discovering it together. We're discovering each other's stories.
My mother, Margaret, the Catholic Puerto Rican from the Bronx, who married Hossam Kafaji, the Muslim Egyptian, decides to convert to Islam when I'm 4 years old.
Her mother is not happy.
I'm a little nervous, but I think it's really important to have my voice heard as well as the other people participating.
1998.
1998, Greenville, South Carolina.
Greenville's a small suburban place. Everybody is white and Baptist except for a very small minority. It's really boring. My mother is Baptist, but my father is Muslim. It's really inspiring because it's been a while since I had so many Muslim people all at once, people who identified or had a culture with Islam, and it's been years, so it's really, it feels kind of like home in a way, actually.
2012.
I'm ready to make a change in my life. I want people to know that I am Muslim and know that my story can be a Muslim story. I heard about Beyond Sacred from my Arabic teacher, and I was really interested because I think I have a really interesting story, so I wanted to share that with the world. A lot of people know me in the school, and they think they know me, but they don't really know me. Do you think you're comfortable?
Yeah.
It's going to be a fun show. Some people think maybe I was born Muslim because I wear the hijab and I have the look. People will be surprised when they find out that the way I was before when I was younger is very different than how I am now.
2002.
2002.
I started dressing like a goth punk. Pink hair, fishnet stockings, and short skirts.
One of the things that the group really demonstrates is that there's no one Muslim identity or no one Muslim culture, and that's one of the things they talk about in the script.
I've always been an easy-to-digest Muslim. I look and talk and dress and act like everyone else, whatever the hell that means. I don't understand how people can presume to define the faith and identity of other people.
So each person that we bring in, we try to maximize the differences so that we can have as many layers as possible.
After 10 years of the Soviet-Afghan war and civil war, the Taliban comes to power in Afghanistan.
They impose their own interpretation of Sharia law.
My name is Firdaus Dehkhan. I'm originally from Afghanistan. I came here almost 2 years ago. At the first time I saw that in campus, I was like, oh, I need to get more information about that. I thought that at a time when Islamophobia is increasing and arising, so it's good to join to this program and give a different image or picture from Muslims.
Hi, Firdaus.
How's it going? All the media is about just they're trying to portray that when it comes to Muslims and Muslim culture, they talk about terrorism, and Muslims are terrorists, about violence, but I'm talking about this, that to express the facts about Muslims, that not all Muslims are terrorists.
Terrorists! Terrorists!
Terrorists, go back to your country!
I have always felt American. I was born here. But now I feel like I have to act more American. I think it's difficult because you want to do what the religion requires you to do and you want to follow the religion and be good. But I feel like people want to judge more when you wear a hijab. People would see me going to one car and they would like dash out of the car.
After 9/11, it all of a sudden becomes that my faith is the end-all be-all of my identity. It's the only thing that I am, and it is these things that have been portrayed in the media.
White people say to me,
Oh, you're a nice Muslim. You make Muslims look like good people.
what the fuck do you mean we make Muslims look good? We're just people, like anybody else.
All of a sudden, on September 12th, 2001, everyone already knows. They know why I'm here. They know what I'm supposed to look like and what I'm supposed to do and how American I really am.
An FBI study found that 94% of all terrorist attacks in the US were committed by non-Muslims.
It's like it's our job to make people feel like we are safe Muslims.
Assimilated.
So every time you do a 10 clap, watch each other so you're together. And so right from the start, when you say Maha starts with let's get started, it has to be welcoming. It has to have energy.
Ping is awesome, and he turns us into performers. It's incredible.
There's a rhythm to it. You want to keep the rhythm going through it.
1947.
1947.
1947.
1947.
1947.
1947.
Right.
My favorite part of the rehearsal is definitely when we get to warm up together. You can see like how everyone has such a strong personality.
Just the sense of rhythm and pace.
This piece allowed me to really be more comfortable with who I am and accepting myself and not putting myself in any one particular box.
I'm really ready to perform and let people know what being Muslim in America is really like.
Class differences stare me in the face. My father's struggling.
I think they're just really happy to be able to do this. I can see it, I can see that it matters to them.
The opening night is going to be tomorrow, and it's starting at 8 p.m.
April 29th. So I feel excited.
Lights go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I just got my first taste of what the lighting's gonna be like, and it's like standing in the sun. I'm honestly really like upset that it's almost over. Some of my friends are actually coming up from DC and stuff.
Yeah, my Yemeni friend is coming.
Yeah, Michael is coming.
Oh.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I think the idea of just placing real people on stage and saying, I want to have an opportunity to tell you my story, let people hear the stories, and then ask questions about it afterwards. That's such a beautiful gift that we can give to the community and to the theater world as a whole. And so one of the things I'm in the process of doing is trying to start an institute here on theater for social change called Stages of Change.
My name is Stephen Hitt. I am Managing Director here at the LaGuardia Performing Arts Center, and I thank you for coming out for the world premiere of Beyond Sacred.
Bringing these techniques, having the tools available for people to learn and to build their own work and tell their own stories is, I think, an exciting thing to do.
Expressing people's narratives and being able to relate to those is going to make a huge difference, I hope, in people's perceptions of Muslims and Muslims in America.
The audience comes in, first sees difference, but by the end of the show, it isn't difference that they see. What they see is the commonality of human experience.
We watched the Twin Towers fall. Afterwards, my father says,
as a Muslim, things are going to change for you from now on.
I'm holding my mother's hand tight as we cross the street. We have to pass a Taliban station.
I attended 16 schools in 20 years. I'm used to being seen as a minority, an outsider.
I want people to know that my story can be a Muslim story.
I think that one of the things when I started Undesirable Elements, I thought of it, it's certainly a work of theater or performance or whatever you want to call it, but its goals were also about how we speak to each other in a community. And that community you can think of as the United States, and who determines who is an American. That is something that we know is problematic in the sense that some people would like to exclude some of us as Americans. And yet the history of America is all the immigrants who ever came here. I have a Native American friend who was standing in a supermarket line and someone cut in front of her and she said, "You just cut in front of me." And the woman said, "Go back to where you came from." And she said, "That's where you're wrong." But today we are asking, we are being told who is or who isn't an American. And in the case of Muslim Americans, they've been here since the beginning of this country because 15 to 30% of the slaves in the United States were Muslim. People don't think about that. They built the White House. They contributed through, unfortunately, slave history, the well-being that this country has gained, that we've all benefited from, every one of us in this room. Slaves were the economy, the driving engine of this country. And so to think of Muslims as people who aren't American is a lie. So my object for Undesirable Elements, the whole series, whether it's about the Congolese or whether it's about Muslims or people with disabilities, is that we are all in the same community and that the people on stage are part of the community of the people who are out in the audience. The next project I'm going to show you, Undesirable Elements started more than 25 years ago, and we've done it in different countries where the question was, for example, in Japan, who is the foreigner? Who's the outsider? We've done it in Holland and in different countries. So the question is still the same, is that in the end, it's about our common humanity, is to recognize our common humanity by the end of the show. Another show the one I was telling you about that's playing right now in Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, is a very important show to me because we again have this terrible thing going on in our country which we have not owned up to, which is the deep racism at the heart of being an American. And that work is about the way we have treated African Americans historically from the founding of this country to the present. And that needs to be faced by all of us and needs to be recognized, as painful as it is, this history of racism and the suffering of the African American people who really we are indebted to for the building of this country. So this other piece that I did is closer to my traditional style of work, which is interdisciplinary work, meaning that it includes projections, it includes dance, it includes theater, and so on. I should also mention that I actually graduated in filmmaking, so that my generation of artists, you know, coming out of filmmaking in the 70s, we were part of the pioneering generation that used media in the performing arts. And because I came out of film, sound, for example, we all know that if you turn off the soundtrack of a horror movie, you're not scared anymore. So, you know, that tells you how powerful sound is. And yet, when I started out in the theater, people weren't using sound in the theater because there was a snobbery about theater, which is about the text, and nothing else seemed to matter. And my view of what theater is, or what the performing arts is that all of it has to be taken into consideration: how you use the space, what is, how projection can function in a 20th and 21st century world of changing technology. All of these things are part of the whole. It's a more holistic view of all these elements rather than just about text alone. I have the greatest respect for text, but it isn't, when something happens on a stage, it isn't just text, because where you move the actors in space also speaks metaphorically. And whether you have projections in relationship to those actors matter. So I think of interdisciplinary work as being a much more holistic approach. So the next work, called Collidescope, Adventures in Pre- and Post-Racial America, is a work that is more in my traditional style of work. What I did with Collidescope is that I framed the whole issue of black and white race history in America as being seen from the point of view of aliens from outer space. The aliens come upon this race called Homo sapiens and is puzzled by this problem of race. So what they do is they Google different historical events, and I don't tell the audience exactly what the staging is, but it's as if you, the audience, became the aliens watching reconstructions of racial history in America as realized by the aliens. So it's not 100% accurate because aliens are doing it. So think of archaeologists finding some site and going, this vase was used for human sacrifices or something like that. And then really, in fact, they don't really know for sure what these things are, right? So we reconstruct, so the aliens are reconstructing these different scenes. I was inspired by the killing of Trayvon Martin, and we have to remember that since the iPhone and the cell phone came into existence, we started to be able to document these killings of unarmed black people. But before that, between the history of lynching, which was illegal, which was there was no law passed against lynching, between that period and the present, there were killings of this kind going on all along. It's really only because we have the cell phones and things like that that it's become visible. But in fact, this has been going on since the Civil War ended. So at the beginning of the production, we have the alien procession, which leads into the Trayvon Martin killing, which was what inspired me to do this piece, because I recognized that this was something tragic and unjust and needed to be addressed, as many people agree in this country. So the Trayvon Martin event was what inspired the show, but then I said, how do I frame this material, because people have a hard time dealing with race history. And I said, well, we'll frame it from this alien point of view, which makes it an anthropological point of view, and that the audience watching it suddenly is looking at this from an outside point of view, like an anthropologist would. And because it's being staged by the aliens, I also decided to cross-gender cast people. I also cross-colored casting people. So, for example, in the Civil War scene, we have a ball at a Charleston ballroom of the aristocracy of the slaveholders, and I casted African Americans as the aristocracy as well as white actors to force the audience to look at this in a very different way, a fresh way, in fact. So the show is like a time machine moving back and forth in time in different racial situations. So this is the beginning of the Trayvon crime scene. So we move back and forth in time. The next scene after Trayvon is set in 1775, just outside of Boston, just before the American Revolution. And those of you who know this history, this was a time of where the colonists were saying that the British had been were enslaving them. And this was also a time and we don't realize this, but African-American black activism had been going on all along. It just wasn't just the civil rights era that black people were fighting for their rights. They were doing it right from the start. And this is a scene of free blacks and enslaved blacks getting together to figure out how to petition the New England government to free them with the argument that you're saying the British are enslaving you, but what are you doing to us? Isn't that a contradiction? Shouldn't you be freeing us as well? And I opened that scene with a Muslim call to prayer to remind the audience, again, that Muslims have been here from the very beginning. And I wanted to focus that as the first thing you see in that scene. Each scene is set up for the audience to help anchor the audience as to where the scene is happening, when the scene is happening. And here it says on the eve of the American Revolution, 1775. So this is their kind of Google data at the top of each scene. And you can see that projection is used here, both rear and front projection as well. Because I said I cross-culturally casted people, for example, here the son of this African-American couple is played by a Filipino-American. I wanted also to emphasize the fact that there is only one human race. Genetically speaking, we haven't been here long enough to be more than one race. Yes, skin color is different. Yes, some body types are different. But on the deepest level, there is no difference. So I decided to cross-cast all of these things for that very reason, to remind us all in the same way that when you see Undesirable Elements at the end of it, at first, at the beginning, you see difference. But by the end of it, you see that it is about our common humanity. And this show is as much about what it means to be an American, that we are all in the same boat together and that we have to work together to make it a more equal society and a more kinder society as well. One thing that we do with Collidescope is we've done it at the University of Maryland, then we did it at UMass in Amherst, Massachusetts, and now it's playing in Wake Forest University at Winston-Salem. We decided that every time we do this show in a different state, we would pull a scene out and replace it with a scene about race history in that state. So in North Carolina, we put in a scene that did not exist in the UMass scene. And this scene in the UMass production was about Emily Dickinson's father, who defended a black man who kidnapped his niece because she was about to be sold and enslaved from the north to the south. One of the scenes that remains in every production since the UMass production, because the UMass production had two new scenes installed into the show, is about a terrible lynching that happened in Georgia, where 10 innocent people were lynched because they were trying to catch one man who had killed his master in self-defense, and the mob went crazy and was going out and killing all these people who were innocent. And what I did with the scene was that it was being the ghosts of these people who died are coming out to speak on their own behalf. The end of the first act of Collidescope ends with the American Civil War on the eve of Lincoln's election at this ball that's happening of the aristocracy slaveholders. And it is a scene where they are debating the whole issue of slavery and the North. One thing we must remember is that most of the slave ships, some over 50% of the slave ships were northern. They weren't southern. They were northerners who ran the slave ships. So the North is not really exempt from this terrible history. And the other thing is that the largest gathering of the KKK was not in the South, it was in Indiana. And we know that in the North, for example, in New York City, blacks were often not allowed into certain hotels or department stores and things like that. So there was unofficial racism in the North, whereas in South it was official. I was just in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I visited the International Civil Rights Museum in a Woolworth, which is kind of like the Walmart of today, where there was a huge lunch counter where African American students did a sit-in where they insisted on being served because they weren't allowed to sit at the lunch counter. And I went to visit this museum, and the lunch counter was still there in the museum itself, which is the facade of which is the Woolworth. And I know quite a lot about the civil rights history, but one of the things that really haunted me was that they had reconstructed the train station entrance, where it said colored entrance, and they had a Coke machine in the exhibition that was divided by a wall, but there were two sides to this Coke machine that you can get Cokes, one on the white side and one on the black side. The white side Coke machine said a Coke was 5 cents, and the other side, it said 15 cents on the black side, or the colored side. Now, that may seem like something out of the past, but we know that in just a month ago, J.P. Morgan was fined $55 million for charging people of color for their mortgages more than they were for white mortgages. And we also know that in the past, in car dealerships, they were charging people of color more. So this is a consistent problem that continues into our own very time. So this is something that needs to be addressed. This is the Civil War scene, the entrance into the beginning, the introduction to the Civil War scene. One of the things that is very important if you're dealing with dark and heavy subject matter, it's like if you give someone a spoonful of medicine that's bitter, you're going to get a lot of resistance. So when we did the Civil War scene, we wanted to make it light as well as dark. So it's like putting a little sugar into the medicine. That was our approach to this very dark subject. So even though the subject is dark, there's a lot of humor in the show as well. Here you get an example of the cross-cultural casting as well as cross-gender casting. And this is the end of the Civil War scene where the two people in the window are announcing that Lincoln has been elected. One of the big issues of the past which continues to haunt us today is voting rights. And this was a scene of the 1968 election year when Lyndon B. Johnson was trying to get elected after JFK was shot. And the Mississippi delegation, the black Mississippi delegation, wanted to be seated at the Democratic National Convention because they said the white Southern Democrats did not represent their interest and was in fact against their civil rights. So they wanted to be seated, and this was a scene where LBJ is very upset because he was afraid of losing votes if they seated the black delegations. Fannie Lou Hamer, one of the black civil rights activists at the time, spoke at the Democratic National Convention. They didn't get seated, but she got to speak about the fact that she tried to go to vote and was terrorized by the police and by the highway patrolmen. Today, we know that more than 15 states are trying to block the voting rights of people of color once again, and the Supreme Court also has moved against it. What happened with Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony at that time was Lyndon Johnson wanted to get Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, and others off the television screen. Didn't want them to be heard because he was afraid of losing the election. So what he did was when Fannie Lou came to testify about being beaten and brought in jail and terrorized by the police, what he did was he cut her off by speaking on television at the same time she was speaking on television. So because the president was coming on to speak, she was cut off. What happened was it actually backfired on him because the newspapers all picked up on what was said and reported it. I think that sounds kind of familiar today, doesn't it? And this was a scene where after LBJ comes out to speak, she's silenced, but we projected what she was saying anyway, so you could see it. This also moved to one of the great African-American civil rights activists, Paul Robeson, because he was promoting the workers' cause. You know, in the 30s, after the Depression, many people in this country turned to communism because of the Depression, when the workers were all suffering terribly, and communism seemed like the right way to go because it supported workers. It was against color discrimination. So idealistically speaking, it was a good movement, and Robeson was penalized for supporting workers, supporting unions, and being positive about communism. And so this was a scene in which he was being prevented from leaving the country. They took his passport away from him, and he was blacklisted for 10 years and could not work. Meanwhile, even though the committee, the HUAC committee, the witch hunt against communists at this time, said that they were doing something legal when in fact it was completely illegal. And we have some of that going on right now today as well, as you know. So what's interesting is that from 2013, when we first did the show, to the present, the show has become, even though the subject matter is a lot of it is about the past, the show that's happening right now in Winston-Salem suddenly becomes more about the present than about the past, which is kind of amazing. Finally, at the end of the show, we have people coming on to set up memorials for the dead. And by the dead, we mean people who were lynched, the naming of people who were lynched, the naming of unarmed black people who were killed. And here it's quite clear that black lives do not matter because the amount of names could not be filled on this screen. And this was a huge stage. You could not name all the people who were killed by lynching or by killed as unarmed people. And in fact, there's tons of people who were killed who are nameless because we don't even have that history or their names. finally, at this moment, as this is accumulating, people bringing on candles and remembering the dead, the aliens summarize their research of this peculiar race of people and their peculiar problem and decide that this issue of race is a myth, an artifice, not really real, a creation. But they have to leave. They have to move on to some other galaxy. They've got other fish to fry in the universe. So they're splitting, and their conclusion is, we think there's something pathological going on here, but we can't stick around. We have other fish to fry, so we're taking off. And if we come this way again, we'll see if they've resolved this issue or they've destroyed themselves. And then what happens is the spaceship takes off, and you see the Earth receding into the distance, and that's the end of Collidescope. Thank you. So these two projects represent work that I've been very much engaged with, and as an artist, in the mid-'80s, I realized that as an artist, as an American, as a citizen of this country, that I felt it was my duty to work towards change that would help in whatever small way that it can from an artist. One of the things about Collidescope is that it's been done only in universities so far, and it has been my policy when I go create work with students at universities that they not only learn about the art of making theater, but that they need to learn about hidden history, about lost history, about the injustices of their society that needs to be addressed, and that they have a stake in this history, and that they are the future, and that they need to address some of these things as well. So when I'm working in universities, this is my goal. So I've always, for example, the piece about the Belgium Congo that was staged with puppets and so on, that was done, for example, at Kent State in Ohio. So this is what I do when I'm traveling to different communities. The Undesirable Elements project has been done internationally in different countries, again addressing this problem of how we see each other as other and not recognizing our common humanity. So that's been very much my work in the last 25 years, and that continues to be. My next work that I'm working on, a much smaller scale work, is about the history of encounters in Alaska, from the arrival of the Russians to the Alaskan area, to all the way up through Exxon Valdez, and a little known history of how the father of the hydrogen bomb tried to explode megaton atom bombs in Alaska to excavate a harbor for peaceful purposes. And this was only defeated by the brave activists who was of the fledgling anti-nuclear movement. It was definitely a David and Goliath story. When they were when Edward Teller, the father of the hydrogen bomb, also the prototype for Dr. Strangelove for Stanley Kubrick, was going to do this, a scientist asked him, well, what if the wind blows back towards us? And he said, oh, don't worry, we're doing this when it blows the other way. This is in the 50s. I mean, this was after the atom bomb in Nagasaki, after Marshall Islands, after all this. So it wasn't exactly unknown what the consequences of this action was. Not to mention the fact that in Alaska, even before this thing, because of all the testing in Nevada and all the testing, Los Alamos and all that stuff, that the radioactive clouds were moving north. And lichen, the stuff that reindeers eat up north, actually retains radiation. Even when it snows and everything, it doesn't go away. It retains radiation, which means that in the ecosystem, the reindeer are now polluted. And that had already been going on before Edward Teller tried to blow up a harbor 30 miles from the oldest in Inupiaq village that had been there for 10,000 years. Those people were never even consulted about the fact that this was about to happen. Imagine you yourself living 30 miles away from where this was going to happen. Fortunately, they got wind of it eventually, and they actually managed to stop it. So this is the next project I'll be working on. And with that, let's go on to the little space where we're going to be talking. Thank you.